Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back again for another episode. And I'm absolutely thrilled today to have CJ Goodwyn. CJ, first of all, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
So, we rarely get Kerrville natives on the pod, and you are one. So, why don't you tell us about where I just told everyone where you grew up, but where you went to high school, where you went to college, and what you're doing now?
Sure. So yeah, I lived in Kerrville for a while. Or I want to say probably like first, second grade ish. But I went to Tybee High School. I went to Shriner University, as did my brother, Matt Goodwyn. And that's kind of where I grew up. We grew up here in Kerrville. Did a lot of sports, soccer, basketball, what everyone does, I guess, in Kerrville, a lot of sports. But funny enough, at the time, I wasn't really doing anything for like film or theater or anything to that nature. I always enjoyed film when I was younger. I just kind of kept it, I guess, more to myself. So then after college, got married and got into the resort industry. And so I did a lot of recreational manager type work, where I was still able to be pretty creative and have fun with it. Like we were doing like Grinch shows for Christmas. So I was starting to put on productions of my own just through my own job and things of that nature. And then it's got the bug. Went to the theater with my mom and we watched like 3 horror movies in one day because we normally try to do something like that around Thanksgiving. And I really wasn't too impressed, to be honest. We all have our opinions with movies, and that day I was just like, "Yeah." Then my mom was like, "Well, why don't you make a film?" I was like, "Well, maybe I will." And I always kinda wanted to, but I think she just kinda, as my mom was when we were younger with sports, she was the one that kinda just pushed us, and so I went home, wrote a script in 2 or 3 months, got my brothers and my friends involved, went out and made my first featured film, and I didn't start with a short, didn't go to film school, just jumped in Tarantino style or Christopher Nolan style, and it was brutal. It was brutal, man. My first film was, pretty rough. I learned a ton. But yeah, the first one is that was my 4 year
For your
college work.
degree.
Exactly, and I'm glad. I even though it was really difficult and we had its challenges. In fact, my brother, Matt, he actually tore his Achilles, not while we were filming, he was playing soccer, but he was one of the actors in the film, and so we had to work around that. And so I've already got hit with a lot of different challenges on my first film that I wasn't expecting. It's taught me how to kinda work outside the box and still make movie magic happen. So,
So, tell us about the feature films you've done.
yeah, so GH5 was my first featured film, which I just briefly touched on. It was sort of a psychological thriller. And then Jackson, that was the follow-up to GH5. That's where I met Les Bess on GH5. He had a small role, and I didn't realize at the time, but he was a professional actor and found him through backstage.com. And he already done like 50 projects. He was on the Leftover show on HBO. Like he's done some pretty big things. And he just happened to like me enough to come back. I sent him a script for the film Jackson, and it portrayed around his character, which happened to be just another psychological type horror. And we hit it off really well. And while we're doing that, my third feature I came up with is called Eyes of a Roman. And that's based off Marcus Crassus' Spartacus, that genre. And it's basically just starts 3 days before the final battle between Spartacus. And so it's about a relationship between Marcus Crassus and a stepson that I created for this film. And that film's doing really well. It's out like on Stash Movies. I think it's 350,000 views. It's on Tubi, Amazon. So that one's doing pretty good, which is exciting. And then my latest film, Sherlock Holmes, Mare of the Night, that's one we just wrapped filming in November of last year. So right now I'm in post-production on it, and right now I'm laying down all the great audio that you need for the film, and I wanna say in probably about a month, it'll be sent off to my composer, Antonio Guidanti, who lives in Canada, and, he's been my composer for my last 2 features, and so now he's doing this one for me as well.
And what's the line about?
Yeah, so Sherlock what's interesting about the story is really what I wanted to do was just humanize Sherlock Holmes. And so obviously he's a great character. Everyone kind of knows him from the books Arthur Conan Doyle created. The movies, whether you're the Kubrick fan or Robert Downey Jr.'s fan, or all the way back to the, I don't know, hundreds of actors that portrayed him. I want to humanize him. And what would it look like if he was a real person and he's going through all these cases, dealing with murderers and serial killers and just missing cases on a daily basis. What does that do to a person over 50 years of your life? And what would that do to the people around you, sort of in your inner circle? And that's really what I want to portray. Obviously, Sherlock is portrayed as a hero. And I think a lot of times people don't realize, but heroes go through some of the darkest moments to save certain people. So I really wanted to showcase that and to show what it would look like. So we went a much darker route with Sherlock Holmes. You can see the teaser trailer online, and that'll kind of give you a good idea of how dark it is. But I'm excited to showcase that movie. We have a really great ensemble cast. There's definitely some characters that people know from the books, but then there's also characters that I created to put into the universe of Sherlock Holmes, including our female villain, who's played by Michelle Masker out of San Antonio. So exciting times.
I'm a Holmes aficionado. I've focused on the short stories and the novels. At a podcast festival, I came across a guy who was an old-time radio aficionado.
Oh, cool.
And so his Holmes is the radio Holmes. Now there's multiple actors, but it opened up for me a whole new dimension of Holmes because, of course, it was the audio experience as opposed to me reading it and me interpreting it. Now I've got someone else looking at it from perhaps a more visual experience as well. So I can't wait to see this movie. You mentioned a couple of times about being in post-production. Where do you actually do the production? Do you have a studio at home?
Yeah, I basically do all the post-production at my house. I have my own little studio in my house. And that's probably the toughest part of the process. I think when you watch a Hollywood featured film and you see all the credits roll and you see thousands of people that work on it, I would say at least half of those are post-production people. And for me, it's just me. So it takes a long time. You gotta be very disciplined and stay the course. Besides Antonio, he throws on the music, helps with sound effects. But the rest of that's really me, man. And it takes a long time going through all that footage and finding the story you want to tell. Cause there's 3 stories, right? You write one, you film one, and you edit one. And they're all a little bit different. But because I wrote the script and I also shot the film, at least this one I did. What's in your mind? You know what story you want to tell. And so no one can tell it really better than you can. And so you take all that on and just know it's going to be a lengthy process. I definitely try not to rush it at all for sure, but I'm pretty steady at it. I say at least 4 or 5 hours every day I work on it. And that's probably my average. Some days I don't work on it, and some days I work 12 hours on it. So kind of average out to that. But it's going really well. I'm around the 2-hour mark right now, and I'm pretty excited with what we have. So
Let me visit with you about your creative process. You said with Mare of the Night, you wrote the script. You obviously directed the filming of it. Did the story change from the printed word on the script, or rather, let's start with in your head,
sure.
to the printed word, and then to filming? Do things change as you're filming that you realize maybe we should take a different direction? Maybe the actor or actress has a different interpretation, or does the character literally say, no, we're going this direction?
Sure. I think for me, at least on this film, 100% the story kind of morphed and changed in certain ways throughout the process. One thing that I did that was different on this movie is we filmed probably like the first half of the movie on April, May, and June. And then we kind of took July and August off. Then we came back end of September and finished the movie, which normally I don't do that. Normally I push through. We do 3 months of filming and we're done. But during that process, having those 2 months off, it kind of gave me time to kind of revisit the script a little bit, see if we can make some things stronger, or just how we were like when we were filming. And you start seeing these characters kind of come to life, which these actors spend a lot of time on. And I think that can be something that people maybe the outside world don't understand. But so with me, when I write a script and the character gets casted, well, then we sit down in pre-production and we go over it a lot. They ask me a lot of questions. Where did this person come from? What do they like to wear? What do they like to eat? Like everything. They want to know everything. They want to become this person, which is great. Now, obviously, when I write, I don't always have those type of things in there. So that was a little bit of a process that's fun for them. But once we get that narrowed down and they understand the direction that I want the character to go in, and of course, they know the dialogue. Well, now it's up to them. It's their job. Here, I give it to you. This is now your baby. Go find this person. And then when we film on this day, show up and be ready. And that's kind of what it is. And so they show up. So the first time I get to kind of film them on set is really the first time I'm seeing these characters kind of come to life also. It's kind of like watching a theater show while you're working and filming at the same time. Now, during those processes, I always say I normally give about, I don't know, 2 or 3% feedback to the actors once we get to the filming process. Because most of the time they're great. They're doing good. They're doing good. For me, I'm just looking for those little things that could help their scene, whether it could just be really simple stuff too. Like, hey, on this one, just look over here instead of over there. Just little things sometimes make a huge difference, which the audience don't realize when they're watching the movie, obviously. But yeah, the process was pretty wild. I had a lot of conversations with Les Best, who played Sherlock Holmes in this film, because the story that we're telling is just so different and so dark. And so he was like, "Yeah, are the fans gonna be like mad?" I was like, "Some of them, yeah, I think so, man. I think probably it'll probably be split. I think a lot of the Sherlock fans, I think, will enjoy what we went for because we definitely went for it. But I think some of them are like, no, that's not Sherlock. Sherlock doesn't show like feelings like that." I was like, "Well, that's the whole point, right? We humanized him. If he was real, what does that look like?" And like, obviously, he's broken in our movie too. A lot of things have happened, and he's seen a lot of bad stuff. So yeah, man, it was a fun process.
Is he over his drug addiction?
I'm not going to reveal anything, but what I can tell you is with Arthur Conan Doyle, we wanted to stay true more to his material on some of those things. And obviously, Sherlock did drugs, he did alcohol, all those things. And so you'll see that. We did a short film to help with crowdfunding before the feature. And in the short, you see him smoking opium in the short film. So that kind of gives you an idea what the movie is and what's coming. So yeah, it's a little bit different than Robert Downey Jr.'s or what I like to call Hollywood's version.
Sure.
Yeah.
So tell me about your creative process on your screenwriting. Does it happen in your head and your fingers just report on paper, or do you work it out? You have an outline? How's that part of your creative process?
Yeah, it's another thing that's interesting because I think everyone's different. It's like Tarantino, he still writes, and the actors show up, and he's got like this ugly looking script of paper and scribbles and highlighted markers. It's like, why don't you use computer? Because Tarantino doesn't do that. That's his style. My style is I actually like to go for drives. So I'll literally just go drive for hours by myself. And it's normally at nighttime. And I just need sort of that silence. And you kind of have the little background road noise. I'm normally on the highway. And then I can just kind of dive in and I can really just create a film from beginning, middle, and end in almost 30 minutes to an hour. And then it's just, is the film good enough? Is this the story you want to tell? And then once I decide, yes, this is the movie I want to see. And I tell writers that all the time, new filmmakers, just make sure you're making a film that you want to see. You know, don't make one that you think the audience would like, because that's not going to set you apart. You know what I mean? That starts my process. Then I go home and I just write the main notes, the really important pieces of what I cannot forget. And then it just starts the daily process of connecting the dots, creating these characters, which I'll like for Sherlock. You know, one of the things I'm really excited about is Inspector Lestrade's character. And I kind of found that he kind of got the short end of the stick. He kind of shows up and he's just this inspector. I was like, well, what happened to him? How did he become inspector? What's his story? And so I thought that was kind of fun. And so in this film, I touch on Lestrade all the way from the age 5. And so that's a new sort of aspect to that world of Sherlock, which I'm excited to show. So that really got me excited. And then, of course, I've read a few of Doyle's books, but I didn't want to read too much. So I didn't want it to influence my story or my films. I really just wanted to, like, how does Sherlock Holmes speak? How did Doyle kind of create him? Just so I can kind of have similarities to that nature. Because it's an original script. We didn't pull anything from the books besides just some of the characters, and we touch on some past cases through some creative drawings that we have in the film. That's one of the fun things. We have like this art room, and he would just draw these past cases that kind of haunt him. So that was another little, thing that I enjoyed with the movie. And we got an artist out of Chicago that wrote a lot or drew a lot of them for us. So
Let me turn to the scene that you work in here in the Hill Country. Do you live in Kerrville or you live in San Antonio?
San Antonio.
So what the technical talent that you draw from, not the actors, but on the production side and the crafting side, is there a fair amount of those folks that you can draw upon for making a movie here in the Hill Country?
Yeah, I think all around, I mean, I guess here in the Hill Country specifically, like Kerrville or Fredericksburg or Bernie, there's definitely some. I think I know more from the San Antonio and Austin areas on the production side of cinematography and audio and lighting, things of that nature. But what I found here in the Hill Country is there's a lot of people that want to be in film. It's even whether it's their bucket list or it's just something they want to do, but they don't know where to start because they're in the Hill Country and most of the filming schools are in bigger cities. And so whenever I come here and I say, hey, we looking for some crew members, normally they come on as production assistants. And then what happens is I actually teach while we're filming. So I bring on a lot of volunteers to help with the movie process. It's another thing I enjoy doing. I enjoy teaching and watching people grow. So that's kind of how the process has been for me, at least through the Hill Country, whether it was with some volunteer crews coming on, or in this case, we actually got a lot of actors this time from the Kerrville area, which was a lot of fun too, because a lot of them do theater. And what's fun about theater actors is like they're ready because you have to be like curtain opens up and you're one take. In film, you get 50 take. And Benji spoke about it. He plays Arthur Conan Doyle in the movie. It's another thing that I added in the film, which is really fun. He talked about that on a previous podcast. He's, yeah, I'm used to one take, and then CJ had me do 30 takes, and they may not be used to it. And so it's me telling them up front, look, just know that you're not doing anything wrong. You're doing it great, but you have to do it exactly the same way 30 more times as best as you can. If it's required for that scene. Some scenes, I'll let the actors just kind of do whatever they want. Les is a good example of Sherlock. I don't want to really confine him when, especially it's an emotional scene and there's a lot of stuff happening. No, man, just go nuts. If you want to throw the chair, whatever you think feels natural. So I give and take, but there's definitely some scenes where it's like, all right, you got to do that exactly the same way. And that was a new thing for some of the theater actors that I don't think they quite knew or understood. And Ian McKellen on Lord of the Rings with Peter Jackson mentioned that to Christopher Lee. Is that right? I think he was like, Christopher Lee, Peter's having me do this is like our 16th take. Normally, I've never done more than 8. And Ian was like, no, you're fine. That's just how the director does, because he's looking for something, but you're doing the take fine. And that's kind of how I am as a director, too. I think anyone that's ever worked with me, and they'll be like, yeah, CJ, he does a lot of take. In fact, Andrew was in some of our scenes, in one of our scenes, and we did a lot of takes. That's just how I like to operate. And it's not because they're not doing anything good. It's just because I'm trying to find those magical moments where I call 5% in a film where it just really helps connect the artwork and the story.
Could I ask, do you have another or your next project in mind?
Yeah, I have a couple stories in mind, and everyone's been kind of asking me, but I'm not going to reveal what it is. But I have been touring some of the Texas Hill Country as of late and looking for other locations for filming opportunities, which is another great thing in the Hill Country. There's a lot of landowners that have a lot of great properties. And like for the Sherlock film, Derek Mare, we were on his family's land, and they had houses that were built in 1901. And that's what you see in the movie. And so that was a lot of fun. except obviously in Texas heat or even Texas cold. And so there were days where we were freezing, we were dealing with rain and lightning, we were dealing with 110-degree weather, and that's why we took a break in the summer. We're like, yeah, we can't film in this.
Believe me, I get it. CJ, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time for this episode, but before we leave, I wanted to ask if our listeners wanted more information on any of your productions, what might be the best place or places for them to go?
Sure, I think we have a Sherlock Holmes Mare in the Night website, so you can go to that. You can follow me on Facebook at CJ Goodwyn. You can follow Sherlock Holmes Mare in the Night on Facebook, on Instagram, X, which used to be Twitter, I guess. And also, I believe we're on TikTok. So we're out there. If you want to see any of my projects, really, if you just type in my name on YouTube, or I'll pop up. When you type in CJ Goodwyn Roman, and My Eyes Are Roman film will pop up. Jackson, Sherlock Holmes. It's all there. We'd love for y'all to go check out the Sherlock Holmes teaser trailer, which is on YouTube. The short film's on YouTube also, if you want to get more of an insight of what's kind of coming. And then the featured film, right now we're projecting early 25 for it to be released. And our goal behind the scenes is to have it in a lot of theaters across the country. So we'll show it here in Kerrville for sure, across Texas, across the country. And the hope is to blow it up and get it out there and just keep doing bigger and better.
CJ, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to visit with us, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
Yeah, of course. I really appreciate y'all having me on. It was great.